Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Adhishthanam tata karta karanam cha prithak vidham vividhascha prithak cheshta daivang chaivatra panchamam. Yes. Okay, read the verse again. There's Sanskrit in the verse. Translation.
Adhishthanam tatha karta karanam cha pridak vidham vividhascha pridak cheshta daivam chaivatra panchamam.
In this verse, Lord Krishna is describing the various factors or causes of action. You may think, well, this is pretty heavy philosophy for a hot Sunday afternoon. But trying to understand what is the cause of everything, that is the mission of human life. Human life begins with inquiry into the spiritual. Atato Brahma Jignasa. Now we should inquire into the spiritual. And what is the nature of spirit? That is answered by, or immediately established as Janmadhyasya Yataha. The absolute truth is the source of all emanations. Srila Prabhupada translates it like this. Not only all emanations, but everything that comes into being, everything that is in being, and everything that ultimately is destroyed, this is all affected by the Supreme. Now, this is not simply theoretical philosophy, it affects us absolutely. Arjuna was wanting to know how he should act. So to analyze this very deeply, Lord Krishna is analyzing the different causes of action. In philosophy, it's analyzed there are different kinds of causes. In the Vedic philosophy, that's called the instrumental cause and the material cause. That's the nimitta karan and the upadan karan. The standard example is given, what is the cause of a pot? The material cause is the clay, and the instrumental cause is the potter. Both are required. Without clay, there's no pot. And without a potter, there's only clay, but no pot. Srila Prabhupada writes here in the purport, the Supreme Lord is the super cause. Does anyone know a line from Shastra in which this is stated? There's more than one. Yes. Well-known verses. Aham sarvasya prabhavaha. Yeah, and the next line repeats the same thing. Lord Krishna says, everything is from me, everything is generated. Then the next line after that, Matas sarvam prabhatate, which is the corollary of this, that everything comes from me, Lord Krishna says. Then another famous line that Krishna is the cause of all causes. Sarva karana karanam. Alright. This means that Krishna is the cause of all causes. If we search back long enough, we'll find that the ultimate cause of everything is Krishna. The potter makes the clay pot. The ultimate cause is Krishna. Krishna provides the clay, and he also impels the potter to make the pot. So in non-Vedic philosophy also, there's also the study of cause, and that there are various philosophical systems which expand themselves into sociology, psychology, anthropology, chemistry, physics, mathematics, historiography, and so on. So they also try to understand what are the motivations for human action. In the modern age, the motive for human action is studied carefully by the people in the advertising industry. And they've become very expert in learning how to exploit people's motivations to buy things which they don't need and are actually no use to them. For instance, Coca-Cola. Has everyone here heard of Coca-Cola? Yeah, everyone's heard of Coca-Cola. It's more famous than Krishna on this planet anyway. Everyone's heard of Coca-Cola. If you go to a mountain village in Afghanistan, there's probably someone there, apart from being ready to shoot you for being a non-Afghani, so before he shoots you, he'll sell you a Coca-Cola. If you go exploring in Antarctica and you find some remote civilization stuck away somewhere in Antarctica, and when you come in, they'll offer you a frozen Coca-Cola. So the Coca-Cola company has become very expert in understanding some factors of human motivation, so that they've been able to sell their product, which is actually completely useless all over the world. So, in Bhagavad Gita here also, Lord Krishna is touching on, not going into great depth, but touching on the science of human motivation. Among modern psychologists and anthropologists, there are various theories as to why people do anything. According to their theory, all living beings are simply combinations of chemicals. But somehow or other they say that there's a great motivating factor is that of survival. And practically speaking, we see that not only in human beings, in every species, the living being is trying to survive. If we put a potted plant near to the window, it will grow toward the window because it wants the light so that it can survive, can flourish better. Darwin's theory is the survival of the fittest. So the first or the prime motive seems to be that of survival. Now, you may know that Srila Prabhupada, he discussed the theories of various philosophers. He systematically discussed them for the sake of compiling a book which has been published. What's the name of that book? Beyond Illusion and Doubt, yeah. It's not published. It was brought out first of all as Dialectic Spiritualism, and then it was re-edited and brought out as Beyond Illusion and Doubt. Anyway, Prabhupada had the idea to make a book of discussing prominent philosophers of the Western world, I think beginning with Socrates. It was chronologically the first one there. Now, I've heard it said that Prabhupada said that Freud, Darwin and Marx were the three greatest demons of the modern era. I don't know if it's true or not, but Prabhupada certainly didn't have a very high opinion of their theories. That saying of Prabhupada is not recorded in any book, so it might be just one of those sayings, so we can't really quote it as a fact. But actually, the central point of Freud's teaching, actually Prabhupada agreed with it, that the main impulse of human action is sex desire. However, there's a great difference between the Vedic teaching and the Freudian teaching. That Freud said that sex is the central impulse for action, therefore get into it, do it more, as much as possible. Don't have any taboos. Whereas Srila Prabhupada, following the Vedic conclusion, said, yes, sex is the main motive of human action. That's the problem. Therefore we have to overcome that desire, not indulge in it. But anyway, objectively speaking, we can say that in human life and in most species of life, that survival and sex are two prominent factors in motivating action. We may say, well, these are not the factors which are discussed by Krishna in the verse under discussion today. But remember, there are different kinds of causes, so we're discussing different kinds of causes. One major motive of action is love. Because of love, A man will walk 5 miles in the rain to see his loved one. Because of love of one's country, people will sacrifice their life. So there's an example of the will to survive is eclipsed by the desire to sacrifice oneself for one's country due to love for one's country. The opposite side of love is, of course, hate. This love of one's country is it's nourished by dislike for other countries. So when I was growing up as a child in England in the 1960s, there was still so much, there was always so much bad talk about Germans, because the last war Britain had fought was against the Germans. So that anti-German feeling was strong even one generation later. I think that that's one of the defining characteristics of being a Russian, is that to be a true Russian, you don't like Germans. Is that a fact? It's part of being... No? Not nowadays. Not in England, no, they don't like Germans, but they have a long-standing dislike of French people either. Did this Olympic Games begin yet? It's not yet, still didn't begin. Okay, so this Olympic Games, so I'm told, was originally founded as it's like a kind of when the Greeks or whoever they were, Spartans or whatever, were not fighting, they'd have sports. It's like to keep them fit for fighting. And the one idea about sport is that, well, if you do sport, it keeps you from fighting, because it's a competition, but you don't actually kill people or harm them in most cases. And speaking from my childhood experience, again, we see how this propensity to love that in my native Britain, this propensity to love was, it's focused on some football team. It's very common. And if you love one football team, then you have to hate another one. That's part of it. So while cultivating unmotivated, unadulterated love for your local football team, that's also accompanied by unmotivated, unadulterated hatred for the neighboring team. Here in Russia, the hockey teams are more popular, is it? Football. They have the same thing. They hate the local team, the neighboring team. Or neighboring club, I should say. Whatever. Now, there's a very interesting comment that Srila Prabhupada made in one of his early Back to Godhead magazines. This was maybe in the 1940s, during the Second World War. And in his early Back to Godhead, Srila Prabhupada would often quote from the newspaper statements of important people, and then Srila Prabhupada would comment on that. So Srila Prabhupada was quoting some big shot of the material world, saying that we have to get rid of this frenzy of hate. The frenzy of hate, which at that time was manifesting as the Second World War of the 20th century, in which people just went into miserable conditions to try to kill each other, which they succeeded in doing to a large scale. So Srila Prabhupada noted, very wittily and aptly, that we cannot get rid of the frenzy of hate unless we get rid of the frenzy of love. So people think we should get rid of hate and only have love, but in this material world, the two go side by side. When Srila Prabhupada was preaching Krishna consciousness on the west coast of California in 1967, there were many famous rock bands were being formed that remained famous. Maybe they were just forming at that time. They were very famous. One of the most famous songs of that time, when Srila Prabhupada was preaching there, was You Need Somebody to Love. Something like that. I think it was called that. You Need Somebody to Love. So it seems that in this material, that analysis is there, that everyone needs someone else to love, But it seems that we also need, in material consciousness, we also need someone to hate. We can channel all our bad feelings into someone to hate. We blame others to someone that they're the cause of all evil. So Srila Prabhupada spoke of the frenzy of hate and the frenzy of love. One major factor of human action is religion. That also seems to be more of a motivating factor than that of survival or even sex in many cases. We find in the history of Europe especially that many people, they died for their faith. And many people, they say that, well, religion is the cause of so many problems. It causes so many wars and fights and disputes. One of the most famous people in the world when Srila Prabhupada was preaching was John Lennon, a singer. Srila Prabhupada also stayed at John Lennon's estate for a few weeks. And in one of his songs, maybe his most famous song, John Lennon made a song called Imagine. Imagine a world in which everything was wonderful. So he was describing a world in which there's no hatred and everyone loves each other. And one of the things he said, and there's no religion. How wonderful the world would be with no religion, said John Lennon. It's seen as, many people see it as a great problem, because it seems to motivate people in most unreasonable and unsocial ways. Unsociable ways. Again, giving okay, I'll make this the last example from my childhood memories today. But again, in my childhood, there was one professional football player playing in a major football team. He became in England when I was, maybe 12 years old or something. He became a Jehovah's Witness. So he gave up his well-paying, prestigious job as a football player because he thought it's too aggressive and it doesn't go well with my religion. And instead he got a job as a window cleaner. And guess what he and his wife did in their spare time? Any guesses?
Nobody knows.
They went door to door trying to make more Jehovah's Witnesses. They're very dedicated preachers. Their philosophy is, if a donkey could think, he would say it's nonsense. But somehow or other, they're able to motivate people to go door to door and propagate it. Another factor of human motivation that we don't find in animals at all is the quest for knowledge. And thus, in the modern age especially, people study all kinds of things. Every year there are different branches of, more and more specialized branches of knowledge being set up, studying all kinds of things in all kinds of ways and coming up with all kinds of information and all kinds of theories. It can be very confusing because there's so many different outlooks and angles of knowledge and discovery that it becomes difficult to think of or understand what is the ultimate cause of everything. So these are various motivating factors of human activity. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna gives us knowledge which cuts through the whole massive human endeavor of acting and attempting to acquire knowledge and loving and hating. Cuts through. I mean, he brings us to the... what I mean to say is that all of this whole massive human endeavor is just, it's a big curtain of Maya, and Lord Krishna cuts through it all in Bhagavad Gita. Lord Krishna gives us the knowledge by which we can understand what is the cause of all causes. Simply by studying the effect, it may not be possible even to guess at what the cause is. For instance, if you see a butterfly, you would never guess that it was the cause, or its precursor was a caterpillar. Or you would never imagine that a maggot turns into a fly. Or rather, if you see a fly, you couldn't imagine that it would come from a maggot. You know all those words? Okay, good. Maggots. So, simply by studying material nature and human activity, it's not possible to find out the ultimate cause. But in Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna tells us what is the ultimate cause. Ichha dvesha samutena dvanvamohena bharata sarva bhutani sammoham sargayanti parantapa. Every living being in this material world, why do we act? This is answered in this verse of Bhagavad Gita.
Every living entity in this world?
Yeah, but I
misheard it.
Yeah. The verse which I just quoted from Bhagavad Gita explains why everyone is acting in this material world. It is due to desire and hate, under the delusion of thinking in terms of I, me and mine. Ayam nija paro veti ganana laghuchetasam udara charitanam tu. Then the last line is the famous line, Vasundhaiva kutumbakam. One who thinks in terms of I, me, this is mine, that is someone else. This is me, that is someone else. This is mine, that is someone else. That is someone else's. That someone who thinks like that in terms of me and them, that is the calculation of someone of small consciousness. But one of broad consciousness, of magnanimous consciousness, sees that everyone in the world is just like my family member, intimately related with me. So these are the ultimate factors of action in this material world. We're in illusion. The ultimate factor behind everything is Krishna, and it is our natural propensity to be attracted toward Krishna. But due to forgetting Krishna, we act in different ways. And then everything becomes very confusing. Muhyanti yat suryaham. Even the demigods are bewildered by not understanding Krishna. Now the demigods, they're supposed to be in the mode of goodness. And in the mode of goodness, then Sattvat sanjayate jnanam. From goodness comes knowledge. But despite having fairly clear knowledge, the demigods are also bewildered about the truth of Krishna. So what to speak of the present civilization which is impelled by the lower modes of nature? They're producing so much knowledge and so much analysis, but because they're impelled by the lower modes of nature, the knowledge must result not in more clarification, but in more confusion. They're studying and doing more and more research with the hope of understanding things better, but as the actual result is they're becoming more and more confused. Because they have no framework, no clear epistemological framework by which to understand everything. Therefore they're just throwing more and more information into their confusion soup, and it's becoming more and more confused. So the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita gives us clear knowledge of who we are, what is our existential position, why we are suffering in this material world, and how to be free from that suffering. And the clarity of Bhagavad Gita, the clear knowledge it gives, is a great hope for human society, which is one reason that it appealed very much to the confused hippies in the 1960s, among whom Srila Prabhupada was preaching. It appears from Srila Prabhupada's early writings and his early activities that his original intention was to preach among the leaders or the more cultured or intellectual sections of society. And it seems that Srila Prabhupada had great hope that if this philosophy was presented to them, that they would be reasonable and intelligent people would accept it. However, as it happened, Srila Prabhupada's message or his ministry really went down well among many of the hippies, who although not unintellectual, were a very strange group of people. So you could say that one reason that Srila Prabhupada was successful among the hippies was that he gave a clear direction to very confused people. It's actually amazing how Srila Prabhupada was able to change the hippies, who were dedicated to living a totally unregulated life, and who they glorified free sex and intoxication, as they considered this to be practically sacred. That's described in the Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, that someone who was among the hippies, someone who was intoxicated by taking this drug LSD, they were considered to be like in a sacred state. But Srila Prabhupada, his message was attractive to the hippies for various reasons. They liked his music, they liked his talk of transcendence, they liked it because he was unusual, he was from the East. They liked the descriptions of Krishna, who had long hair, played a flute and danced at night with young girls. But ultimately, of course, it was they liked the music, the chanting of Hare Krishna. They liked prasadam. Still, it's amazing that Srila Prabhupada, he affected a complete change in the hippies and made them into devotees of Krishna. Yeah, as I say, one reason is that he gave them some clear direction, that you should act like this. So for people who are very confused, that can be very attractive, some clear direction. And that's maybe one reason that groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses are also successful in making many converts, even though their philosophy really makes no sense whatsoever. They promote the idea that this is it, you follow it and you'll be saved and everyone else will burn in hell. So we find this kind of preaching is very attractive. It's to many people. They just turn off their thinking mechanism. Because their mind is so confused, they let someone else do the thinking for them. And they have faith that, well, if I just follow this, then everything will be alright. But Krishna didn't present Bhagavad Gita like that to Arjuna, and Srila Prabhupada never presented Krishna consciousness like that to us either. We find that Srila Prabhupada was constantly speaking the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. In the morning he would go on a walk and he would discuss with his disciples the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita. From different angles, often his disciples would, especially in the morning walks, they would bring different bizarre pieces of information from the news and tell it to Srila Prabhupada and get Srila Prabhupada's comment. So then Srila Prabhupada would come to the temple and he'd give Bhagavatam class. And often during the day Srila Prabhupada would meet different people and speak to them the philosophy of Bhagavatam and Gita. And often in the evening Srila Prabhupada would either give a Bhagavad Gita class or he'd have an outside preaching program speaking on Bhagavad Gita philosophy. And at night when everyone was sleeping, Srila Prabhupada would dictate his Bhagavatam purports. So we've all heard many stories of Srila Prabhupada, various anecdotes. But apart from all these various anecdotes, the main thing that Srila Prabhupada was doing day and night was speaking the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita for the benefit of his disciples and everyone else who cared to listen. Because Srila Prabhupada very much wanted that his disciples and everyone in the world who had some intelligence, understand this philosophy and being convinced of it, apply it in their lives in Krishna consciousness. So in philosophy, as I was saying, one of the practically the bedrock or the basis of philosophy is understanding what are the ultimate causes of everything. That is being discussed in this verse that we discussed today to some extent. So we should try to understand these things, how it practically influences our lives. One devotee was telling me that one of his friends who's a devotee is from the country called Macedonia, which used to be part of Yugoslavia. And it's a small country. It's probably smaller in size and population than Tatarstan. So anyway, one of the devotees, before the country became a country, in other words, before it separated from Serbia, there was one devotee who was, he was a devotee, and he's, after the country, so he was a devotee for a few years, and he read Prabhupada's books regularly. And after some time, following a certain trend in ISKCON, he went back to university and he enrolled in a philosophy course. And even his professors were surprised at how much he knew about philosophy. Even he knew many things that they didn't know. So they asked him, well, how do you know so much? He said, well, I'm a member of ISKCON, the Hare Krishna movement, and everyone in our movement knows all these things. It's just ordinary things for us. So he became quite, although a young man, he got quite a reputation for being very highly learned because he'd assiduously studied Srila Prabhupada's books for a few years. And then someone recommended him to the president of the country, and the president appointed him as his the president was asking someone, who do you think I should have as my advisor? And he got recommended, and he's the advisor to the president of Macedonia, which, it's like being maybe the president of it's a small country, but anyway, he's the advisor to him. So that's nice. Srila Prabhupada wanted that his disciples be recognized for their learning and their character and their purity. It's a fact, if we absorb ourselves in the philosophy given in Srila Prabhupada's books, that we can't be bland, stupid people that are just talking all nonsense like everybody does all the time. The teachings given in Srila Prabhupada's books are so profound that anyone who's a little bit thoughtful can understand that this is not simply some dogmatic religion, but it's coming from a platform of higher knowledge. And we're finding that all over the world, many people are very much appreciating Srila Prabhupada's books. Gladini was telling me yesterday that when she shows people books, that they say, oh, is this Jehovah's Witness books? They say, no, these are Prabhupada's books. Oh, Prabhupada's books, okay, that's very good. Alright, give me one. Gradually people are realizing the value of these books. The Jehovah's Witnesses are trying to distribute books, but people in general are not interested, but thoughtful people are interested in Prabhupada's books. I heard about this group, this Scientology group. I've heard they must be here also. Scientology. Something about their books. That in Manhattan, in New York City, if you put anything down for 10 seconds and look away, when you look back again, it'll be gone. But if you put a whole pile of Scientology books, you can go away and no one will come until the garbage cleaner comes and takes it out. No one will touch it. It was the same thing during in the 1970s, late 1970s, 1980s, I was often in Calcutta. And at the stoplights, there'd be urchins hawking these magazines printed in Russia, written in English and Bengali, and at that time in India there was no good quality printing, so very high quality printing, very colorful, very beautiful magazines and books propagating communist philosophy. No one was interested, even though they were very beautifully made. No one was in the slightest bit interested in taking these books. Because despite the fact that they're very beautifully produced, people understand that there's nothing of any interest or value in there. It's just some useless propaganda. But Prabhupada's books have a different reputation altogether. Despite the fact that our movement in general is not as dynamic as it used to be, the people of the world in general are more and more and more appreciating Srila Prabhupada's books. When Prabhupada was preaching in the West, at first when people joined and they went away. Everyone was shocked, including Srila Prabhupada. But after some time, it became unfortunately so common that everyone got used to it. People come, they become enthusiastic, they get initiated, then they go away. We see it all the time, unfortunately. But Srila Prabhupada wasn't discouraged. He said, well, if the books are there, then anyway, new people will come. So, Srila Prabhupada's books, as we can all experience by reading them, they're not just another dogmatic tracts of some sectarian, nonsensical idea. We are not distributing these books because out of some blind sentiment. It's not like just like in the football team, they hate the neighboring team, so it's like that. If you're a Christian, you hate the Muslims, or if you're a Sunni Muslim, you hate the Shia. It's nothing like that. It is a delineation of our eternal relation with the Supreme Cause of all causes, who is Krishna. And knowledge that we can practically apply in our lives so that we can become free from the illusion of attachment and hatred. So please read Prabhupada's books. Has anyone ever heard me say that before? How many times? Don't take to Krishna consciousness simply as a sentiment. Try to understand this philosophy. As Prabhupada took so much endeavor, practically all of Prabhupada's endeavor was to transmit this philosophy and give it practical shape. And if we're actually absorbing that knowledge and perceiving the effect in our lives, then we'll naturally want to distribute this knowledge to others. So, Hare Krishna. Jagadish Pandit Prabhu is coming here regularly and distributing Srila Prabhupada's books. That's nice. But we need more than one Pandit. We need a whole army. Of course, the reserves, they're also required. Not everyone can be full-time, but some people can be part-time also. You're going to other places also? Almatyevsk. Some devotees came from Almatyevsk, Leninogorsk. From Leninogorsk. They still call it Leninogorsk. They didn't change the name yet. Anyone else came from anywhere else today? Nizhny comes. Yeah, right. Okay, good. You know. Yes. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, whose mercy, he's carrying the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is coming to all these places, which most people in Russia, they've never heard about Nityavska. But somehow or other, Krishna's mercy has come here. So please keep on pushing on this movement. Try to distribute this knowledge, practice it in our lives ourselves. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Any question about this? Sorry if the lecture's very philosophical. That's my habit. It was not very philosophical, but anyway, it was a philosophical approach. So when we joined the movement, we always used to discuss all these things like this, and I was trained like that. So it's my habit since joining.
Like it. Western people are more philosophical.
Is it? Then more philosophical than Russians?
Than Easterners.
Than Russians also? You think so? I don't know, it turned out the football team. I think most people are very philosophical. So clearly India was previously a land of great philosophy, but that's really changed nowadays. What goes on in the name of modern Hinduism, all these bogus people, if there was any philosophy, then these people they wouldn't have an inch. They couldn't survive at all. They can only go on because people are completely stupid. Of course, Srila Prabhupada wanted the core of his ISKCON, that in the temples, He wanted that there be Brahmins, that means people who are philosophically inclined, and then for others there may be farms, and maybe there'll be more storytelling or whatever, but for the Brahminical class who are supposed to guide society, they're supposed to understand this philosophy threadbare. Srila Prabhupada used that term, threadbare, which means, you know what I mean? Thoroughly, you can say. Hare Krishna. Any question, please?
It is said that the spirit soul is always active.
Yeah.
How this activity or this action is manifest in the conditioned state? Because it is said that in the conditioned state the soul is sleeping.
Sleeping condition.
Yeah, but in the sleep you can also be active in dreams. So it's like a dreaming state. That's the analogy given. In the dream one experiences as reality. In fact, in the dream it sometimes seems more vivid than what we would call real life. And it can seem so real that even when you wake up, you still think the dream's going on. You still think it's true. A few nights ago I had a dream that my briefcase was broken open and my computer was stolen. I was thinking, oh no, did I back up all my work? All my work is lost.
A few nights ago?
A few nights ago, yeah, in Bombay, just shortly before coming here. And it was so strong that even when I woke up I was still thinking, oh no! And then gradually I realized, oh wait a minute, now, it was only a dream. I'm not on a train, and it hasn't been stolen and broken open, and I'm in this room. It's room 106 in the guest house in this time Bombay, and everything's okay. So Srila Prabhupada in one conversation discussed this very interesting. He was talking about the daydream and the night dream. That we think that this is reality, that I am living in Tatarstan, this is my house, this is my wife, this is my dacha, all these things. But we think it's true because we see it day after day after day. But just like in the dream, it comes to an end and then it no longer exists. So in the same way, this existence, after some time it comes to an end. It's just because it's longer it seems real, but actually it's not real. It's not real in the ultimate sense. So material existence is simultaneously real and unreal. And if we want to say, is it more real than unreal or more unreal than unreal, it's more unreal than real. Just like the dream, it's real. I mean, we really feel fear, sexual attraction, all these things can appear in a dream. The experience is there. But it's not really real because it has no actual substance. It's just a mental construct. So some philosophers or impersonalistic kind of people, they say that, well, everything in this existence is also just a mental construct, which is true to some extent. But the interface with reality is that in this dreamlike human existence, we can cultivate knowledge of Krishna and come to the actual position of reality. Just like in a dream, you may have had that experience. You're having a dream and maybe you're cycling along the road and you're going somewhere to do something, and all of a sudden in the middle of the dream you think, hey, this is all nonsense. I'm supposed to be chanting Hare Krishna. And then you remember about Krishna in the dream, and that whole experience of forgetting Krishna, you forget it because you remember Krishna in the dream. In the dream you understand this is a dream, this is all nonsense. So in this long dream, which we call human life, we can cultivate that in a systematic way, remembering Krishna. Then we can start to come to the position of reality. Anything else? Yes, please.
As far as I can understand from your words in the lecture, you said that love is connected or combined with hate in this world.
Yes.
So how can we get rid of love if the spirit soul has this propensity to love someone? And the second question is, is love with love for Krishna connected with some hate? Can love for Krishna cause hate towards anything else?
Now, in this material world, love, the so-called love, is always accompanied by the hatred or dislike.